Let's look at the if-else statement syntax in C#. Now, when you are designing a problem or a solution to a problem, if you come across the following logic, you come down and you're going to ask some condition, you're going to have some question. And under the condition being true, I'm going to implement some work A. And under the condition being false, I'm going to implement some work B. So under this conditional expression, I am either going to do either one piece of work or another piece of work. I can never do both, and I can never do neither of them. I always have to do one or the other. Well, this type of logic block can be implemented in C# using an if-else statement. So over here we have the syntax for an if-else statement. Now the if statement looks the same as it did in the previous video. We have the keyword if, followed by a pair of parentheses, and inside the parentheses I have a conditional expression. This conditional expression will evaluate to either true or false. Attached to the or underneath the if statement, I'm going to have a code block which contains all of the work that does, or all of the statements that implement work A. Now, immediately following the code block, the if code block, I'm going to have the keyword else. And here I'm going to have, after the else, I will have no pair of parentheses, no conditional expression. The else keyword is all by itself. Then underneath the else keyword, I'm going to have another code block. And inside this code block, I will have all of the statements that implement work B. So the way we flow through this logic block is as follows. We're going to come down and we're going to first test this conditional expression, and it will evaluate to either true or false. If this conditional expression evaluates to true, I will execute all of the statements in the if block, skip the else block. If this conditional expression evaluates to false, I will skip the if block and execute all of the statements in the else block. So I will always execute either the if code block or the else. I can never do both. I can never do neither. I always have to do one or the other. If code block, if the conditional expression is true. The else code block is as if the conditional expression is false. Now, a lot of mistakes that beginners make is they will put a pair of parentheses and try to build a condition next to the else statement. Well, the else statement's condition is always that the above condition is false. That's its true statement, is that the above condition fails. Let's look at some types of problems that could be implemented with an if-else statement. Here our first problem says, if a correct password is entered, output to the console access granted. Otherwise, output to the console access denied. In this case, the password being true has us do one piece of work, and the password being false has us doing another piece of work. So this could be implemented using an if-else statement. Let's look at our next example. If a number is greater than or equal to 0, add that number to a sum. If the number is less than 0, add 1 to a negative number counter. Now, even though our two works are not related to one another, our conditions are. A number is either going to be greater than or equal to 0, or it will be less than 0. It will either be the first condition or the second condition. Because these two conditions are linked, I can implement the solution to this statement using an if-else statement. Now let's look at some examples of logic that could not be implemented using an if-else statement. In our first example, we say, if an age is greater than or equal to 21, print to the console access granted. If the user ID is equal to guessed, print to the console access denied. Now, maybe at first glance, because we're doing an access granted or access denied, the work kind of looks like we're a one or the other. But our conditions here are completely separated. Our first condition is based on an age value being compared to a number, and the second condition is an ID being compared to a value. Because these two conditions do not represent a condition being either true or false, we could not use an if-else statement to implement the solution for this statement. Now I could use two separate if statements, but I could not use an if-else statement. Let's look at another example. If a number is greater than 100, print number too high. If the number is less than 0, print number too low. Again, here's an example that looks like it might be implementable with an if-else statement, but let's look at our conditions. Here I'm testing that a number is greater than 100, and in the next condition I'm testing that it is less than 0. But there is still a whole range of numbers in here that we are not taking into account. So what do we do if the number is between 0 and 100? Because these two conditions do not represent an either or, you will either have a true statement or a false statement. We cannot link these with an if-else. We cannot use an if-else syntax to implement this. Now again, we could use two separate if statements. That would work, but we could not use if-else. Let's do a quick example. So I've modified the write-up of our previous example. Here we are prompting the user to enter a secret code word. If the code word is kitten123, output to the console that the user won a prize. Otherwise, here's our addition, otherwise inform the user they are not a winner. Now in our previous example, under the condition that our secret code word matched kitten123, we printed an extra line. But now we are adding a little bit of work. We see that if the kitten does not equal 123, I want to tell the user they're not a winner. So I have two conditions here that are linked together. You are either, the code word is either equal to or not equal to. So I can use an if-else statement to implement this. But before I use the if-else statement, let me show you, we could use two separate if statements. I could say if code is not equal to kitten123, then we will tell the user console.writeLine, you are not a winner. Now this is a valid solution, but it's not optimized, it's not efficient. Because the code word will either be equal to or not equal to, I shouldn't have to test both of these conditions under all inputs. For example, if the code word does equal kitten123 and I print this line of code of this text right here, I know I don't have to test this one, because if this condition is true, this one cannot be true. But because these two if statements are independent from one another, I'm going to go ahead in my code and I'm going to test that code word to see if it is not equal to kitten123. This will fail and I will skip the code block. So even though I know that this test passed, I still have to test this one because these two statements are not linked. But we can take an advantage of the fact that these two conditions, we have either one or the other will be true. Never both of them, never neither. One or the other must be true. So what I can do here is I can rewrite this as an if-else statement. If the code is equal to the secret code word, we print that you are a winner. Otherwise, we're going to print that you are not a winner. Now in this case, if this first condition is true and I implement this if code block, I don't have to test any more conditions. I know to skip the else block and we're done. Let's test it just to make sure it works. So it doesn't matter what we enter, we should get some type of output statement telling us whether we win or not. So I will enter kitten. Well, we are not a winner here. Let's rerun it and I will enter kitten123 and we are a winner here.